Elena Vasquez stared out the viewport of the diplomatic shuttle as it approached the Concordat. The space station hung in the void like a small moon, its surface covered in lights from 1,000 different architectural styles. Spires reached out into space alongside massive docking arms that cradled ships of every conceivable design. Some were elegant and smooth like teardrops. Others were angular and brutal, covered in armor plating and weapon ports. The station had been here for over 3,000 years, the heart of galactic civilization. She had dreamed of this moment since she was a child reading about the stars. First contact, humanity's introduction to the wider universe. But now that it was happening, Elena felt a knot of worry in her stomach that wouldn't go away. Impressive, isn't it? Colonel Marcus Webb stood beside her, his military uniform crisp and formal. He was her security chief, though she suspected he was also meant to keep an eye on her for the generals back home. Makes our space stations look like treehouses, Elena nodded. That's probably the point. Show us how small we are before negotiations even begin. The shuttle docked with a gentle thump. Elena smoothed down her dark blue suit, checking her appearance one last time in the polished metal wall. She looked tired. The 3-week journey from Earth had been spent reviewing briefings, learning what little humanity knew about galactic politics, and preparing for every possible scenario. Except she suspected they hadn't prepared for the right ones. The airlock opened with a hiss. The air that flowed in smelled strange, like ozone mixed with something floral. Elena stepped through, followed by her team of 12 diplomats, scientists, and security personnel. They were humanity's first official delegation to the Galactic Council. The reception chamber was enormous. The ceiling stretched up at least 50 meters, covered in a shifting display that showed stars and nebulae. Hundreds of aliens filled the space, and Elena had to stop herself from staring. She had seen the videos, studied the files, but nothing prepared her for seeing them in person. There were beings that looked like walking plants, their leaves rustling as they moved. Creatures made of what appeared to be living crystal that chimed softly with each step. Things with too many limbs or no limbs at all, floating through the air. Some were humanoid enough to seem almost familiar, while others were so alien that Elena's brain struggled to make sense of their forms. A delegation approached, led by a being that stood nearly 3 meters tall. Its skin was covered in dark green scales, and its eyes were yellow with vertical pupils. It wore robes of deep purple that seemed to shimmer in the light. This was High Arbiter Zexthor, leader of the Galactic Council. Elena had memorized his file during the journey. Ambassador Vasquez of Earth. Zexthor's voice came from a translator device that floated near his head. The translation was smooth but carried a hint of a hiss underneath. Welcome to the Concordat. You are the first of your species to stand in these halls. Elena bowed slightly as her briefings had suggested. High Arbiter, on behalf of Earth and all humanity, I thank you for receiving us. It is our duty to welcome all species who reach the stars. Zexthor gestured with a clawed hand. Come, the council has assembled to meet you. They walked through corridors that seemed to shift and change. The walls showed scenes from 1,000 different worlds. Elena saw cities that floated in clouds, oceans filled with luminescent life, deserts of red sand under purple skies. Each image was a reminder of how vast the galaxy was, and how new humanity was to all of this. The council chamber was even more impressive than the reception hall. It was circular and vast, with thousands of seats arranged in rising tiers. Each seat was occupied by a representative from a member species. At the center was a raised platform where Zexthor took his place. A smaller platform rose from the floor for Elena and her team. The noise was overwhelming. Thousands of voices in hundreds of languages, all filtered through translators that created a constant buzz of sound. But as Elena stepped onto the platform, silence fell. Thousands of eyes in every color and shape imaginable turned to look at humanity's representatives. Members of the council. Zexthor's voice boomed through the chamber. Today we welcome the humans of planet Earth, the latest species to achieve faster-than-light travel and discover our community of worlds. As is tradition, we gather to offer them the protection and benefits of council membership. There was a polite sound of approval from the assembled aliens. Elena noticed it wasn't enthusiastic. It was the sound of a routine being followed, nothing more. Zexthor continued. Humans, you have entered a galaxy that has known peace and prosperity for millennia. The Council maintains order across thousands of star systems. We protect trade routes, mediate disputes, and ensure that all species can thrive. This harmony exists because of cooperation and contribution from all members. Here it comes, Elena thought. She had read the reports from the few human ships that had made contact with Council vessels before the official invitation. Every species paid. The only question was how much. As a new member species, Earth will be required to contribute to the common good. This is not a punishment, but a privilege. You will gain access to technologies that would take your species centuries to develop. You will be able to trade with thousands of worlds. Your people will be protected by the might of the Council fleet. Zexthor's yellow eyes fixed on Elena. In return, Earth will provide tribute to the Council. This tribute ensures that all members share in both the benefits and the responsibilities of our community. A holographic display appeared in the air above the central platform. Numbers and categories scrolled past in multiple languages, with English appearing alongside the alien scripts. Elena's breath caught as she read the terms. 40% of Earth's rare Earth elements to be delivered annually. Full access to all human artificial intelligence and quantum computing technology, including source codes and research data. And the part that made her stomach turn. 100,000 human soldiers to serve in Council military operations for a minimum term of 10 years, with rotations continuing indefinitely. Colonel Webb made a small sound beside her. She glanced at him and saw his jaw clenched tight. The rest of her team looked equally shocked. These terms are standard for species at your level of development, Zexthor said, as if he were discussing the weather. Other species have contributed more. You should consider yourselves fortunate. Elena forced herself to speak calmly. High Arbiter, these terms represent a significant portion of Earth's resources and population. May I ask what happens if we need time to consider them? A ripple of sound moved through the chamber. It might have been laughter. Zexthor spread his hands in what might have been a gesture of generosity. Of course, we are not unreasonable. You may have 48 of your Earth hours to consult with your government. But understand, Ambassador Vasquez, these terms are not subject to negotiation. They have been calculated based on your world's capacity and the standard requirements for new members. And if we refuse? The question came from Colonel Webb before Elena could stop him. The chamber went completely silent. Zexthor's eyes narrowed. Refusal is not a concept we encounter often, Colonel. Species who choose not to join the Council find themselves isolated. No access to galactic trade, no access to jump gate networks, no protection from pirates or hostile forces. Some have chosen this path. Most have changed their minds within a generation when they see what they're missing. He leaned forward slightly, and some have required corrective action when they became a danger to themselves or others. I trust Earth will be wiser than that. The threat was clear, even wrapped in diplomatic language. Submit or face the consequences. Elena bowed again, her mind racing. We appreciate the Council's generosity in giving us time to respond. With your permission, we will return to our ship and begin consultations with Earth immediately. Granted. Zexthor waved a hand in dismissal. Return here in 48 hours with your answer. I look forward to welcoming Earth as a full member of the galactic community. The platform lowered and Elena led her team back through the corridors. No one spoke until they were safely back in the shuttle and the airlock had sealed behind them. 40% of our rare Earths? One of the economic advisors, Dr. Sarah Chen, looked pale. That would cripple our technology sector. We need those elements for everything from phones to fusion reactors. And 100,000 soldiers. Webb's voice was tight with anger. To fight in their wars. For 10 years minimum. That's not membership, that's subjugation. Elena sat heavily in her seat as the shuttle detached from the Concordat and began the journey back to their ship, the UNSS Endeavour, which waited at the edge of the system. That's exactly what it is. I saw their faces in there. They weren't negotiating. They were dictating terms to primitives who should be grateful for the attention. So what do we do? Dr. Chen asked. We can't agree to this. But if we refuse, then we need to find out exactly what corrective action means, Elena said. She looked at Webb. Colonel, I need you to pull every piece of intelligence we have on Council military capabilities. I want to know what we're really facing if this goes bad. Webb nodded. Already planned to. From what I've seen, their technology is definitely more advanced than ours. But there's something that's been bothering me. What? The way they carry themselves. Did you notice? They move like people who've never been in a real fight. Their security forces had weapons, but they wore them like decorations. I've seen parade soldiers with more tactical awareness. Elena thought about it. He was right. For all their power and technology, the aliens in the Concordat had seemed almost casual about security. How long has it been since the Council fought a real war? According to the briefing files, over 800 years, said Lieutenant Yuki Tanaka, their intelligence officer. There have been minor incidents, pirate actions, and a few enforcement operations against non-compliant species, but nothing that could be called a peer-level conflict. 800 years of peace, Elena murmured. That's remarkable. Or it means they're complacent, Webb said. An army that hasn't fought in 8 centuries might look impressive, but would it hold up against an opponent who actually fights back? Dr. Chen looked between them, her eyes widening. You're not actually suggesting we refuse, are you? They have thousands of species, millions of ships. We have one world. Elena stared out at the stars as they began to accelerate away from the station. Earth was 3 weeks away at faster than light speeds. 3 weeks to decide the future of humanity, submit and become subjects of the Council, or refuse and face the consequences. But there was a third option, one that was forming in her mind as she thought about Zexuthor's casual arrogance, the complacent security, the 800-year peace. What if the Council had forgotten what it meant to face an enemy that refused to surrender? Humanity had never known true peace. Every generation had fought wars, from sticks and stones to nuclear weapons and beyond. Humans were very, very good at fighting. It was practically all they had ever done. We're going to present both options to Earth leadership, Elena said finally. Complete submission or complete refusal. But we're also going to present a full analysis of what refusal would actually mean. Not just economic isolation, but the real possibility of military action. And we're going to make sure they understand what that would entail. You think Earth will fight? Tanaka asked quietly. Elena thought about human history. The countless wars, the empires that had risen and fallen, the revolutions and resistances. She thought about the nuclear standoffs, the guerrilla campaigns, the last stands that became legend. Humanity had a long history of looking at overwhelming force and choosing to fight anyway. I think humanity has never been very good at bowing, she said. And I don't think we're going to start now. The shuttle docked with the Endeavour 30 minutes later. Elena immediately called for a full briefing of all department heads. They gathered in the conference room, which suddenly seemed very small and cramped compared to the vast halls of the Concordat. For 6 hours they analyzed the situation from every angle: economic impact, technological gaps, military capabilities, diplomatic options. The more they discussed, the clearer the picture became. The Council's terms weren't just demanding. They were designed to keep humanity dependent and weak. The technology they offered would come with restrictions. The protection they promised would come with obligations. And the tribute would ensure Earth never had the resources to become truly independent. It's a system designed to maintain the status quo, Dr. Chen concluded. The founding species of the Council hold all the real power. Everyone else pays tribute and follows orders. New species are locked into the system from the moment they join. How many species have refused over the years? Elena asked. Tanaka pulled up data on her tablet. Records are incomplete, but at least 17 species attempted to refuse Council membership in the last 1,000 years. 5 eventually capitulated and joined. 7 were classified as isolated and haven't been heard from since. 5 faced Council military action and were forcibly integrated after their governments were replaced. The room fell silent. The Council's peace was built on submission. Those who wouldn't submit disappeared or were crushed. There's one more thing, Webb said. He brought up a star map showing Earth's region of space. We're not in a strategically important area. No major trade routes nearby. No resource-rich systems that the Council desperately needs. If we refuse and they decide to punish us, they'd have to commit significant forces across a long supply line to a region they don't really care about. That might make them more willing to just isolate us and forget we exist, suggested Commander Park, the Endeavour's captain. Or it might make them more determined to make an example of us, countered Webb. Show everyone that distance doesn't matter. Refuse the Council and you'll be dealt with eventually. Elena rubbed her temples, feeling a headache building. We need to transmit all of this to Earth and let them decide. But I want to make sure they understand one thing clearly. She looked around the table at her team. If Earth decides to refuse, we need to be ready for the consequences. That means assuming the worst-case scenario. A council fleet shows up to enforce compliance. What would that battle actually look like? Webb smiled grimly. Now that's a question I can answer. Give me 12 hours and I'll have a full tactical analysis ready. But I can tell you right now, if the council expects us to roll over like everyone else has for the last 800 years, they're in for one hell of a surprise. Elena nodded. Get me that analysis, Colonel, and make it detailed. If we're going to recommend that Earth says no to the most powerful organization in the galaxy, we'd better be damn sure we can back up that decision. As the meeting broke up and the team scattered to their duties, Elena returned to her quarters. She sat at her small desk and began composing her report to Earth. Her fingers hesitated over the keyboard as she tried to find the right words to describe what had happened at the Concordat. Finally, she began to type. She described the meeting, the terms, the casual arrogance of the council. She explained the trap that council membership represented, how it was designed to keep Earth weak and dependent forever. She outlined the risks of refusal and the possible consequences. And then she wrote something that surprised even herself. Recommendation: Earth should refuse the council's terms, not because we can win a military confrontation, but because submission now means submission forever. The council has forgotten what it means to face an opponent who fights back. They've grown complacent in their power. If we submit now, we'll never get another chance at independence. If we refuse, we might lose, but we'll lose on our feet, not on our knees. And there's a chance, however small, that we can show the council that humanity is not like the species they've dominated before. She read over the words and knew they might be viewed as reckless, even insane. But they felt right. Humanity hadn't come to the stars just to become subjects of an alien empire. They had come to take their place as equals. Elena sent the report with full encryption and then lay back on her bunk. In 48 hours, she would return to the Concordat with Earth's answer. She had no idea what that answer would be, but deep in her gut, she knew what she hoped it would be. The same answer humanity had given tyrants throughout history. The same answer that defined what it meant to be human. No. The emergency session of the United Nations Security Council had been going for 6 hours straight. Elena watched from her seat via quantum-entangled video link as representatives from every major nation on Earth argued about humanity's response to the Galactic Council. The debate had grown heated more than once, and she was grateful to be 40 light-years away from the shouting. We cannot risk military confrontation with a civilization thousands of years more advanced than us. The Chinese representative, Ambassador Wu, was making his case again. The logical choice is to accept their terms and work within the system to improve our position over time. Improve our position? The American Secretary of State James Bradley shot back. With 40% of our rare earths going to them every year, with our best AI and quantum tech handed over, by the time we improve our position, we'll be so dependent on council technology that we'll never be able to break free. This is colonialism dressed up in diplomatic language. It's survival dressed up in diplomatic language, Ambassador Wu replied. We've been in space for barely 50 years. They've had faster-than-light travel for millennia. This isn't a fight we can win. The Russian representative, Minister Volkov, leaned forward. Perhaps not a conventional fight. But throughout history, smaller powers have found ways to resist larger ones. Asymmetric warfare, guerrilla tactics making the cost of occupation too high to bear. We have options. We're talking about aliens with technology we can barely understand, said the British Prime Minister, Sarah Caldwell. Not armies we can ambush in forests. They could sterilize our planet from orbit if they wanted to. Then why haven't they? The question came from Admiral James Chen, who sat at the head of the military briefing table in Geneva. Elena had worked with him before. He was one of the architects of Earth's space defense network, a brilliant strategist who had earned his rank through 3 decades of service. If they're so powerful, why offer us terms at all? Why not just take what they want? The room fell silent for a moment. Elena saw several representatives exchange glances. The Admiral raises a good point, said the UN Secretary General, Amara Okafor. Ambassador Vasquez, you were there. What's your assessment? Elena had been waiting for this question. High Arbiter Zexthor made it clear that refusal isn't common. Most species either join willingly or capitulate after seeing the Council's power. But there was something in the way he presented the terms. It wasn't negotiation. It was a script he'd followed 100 times before. I don't think they expect us to refuse, and I'm not sure they're prepared for what happens if we do. Not prepared? Ambassador Wu shook his head. They control thousands of worlds. They've maintained peace for 800 years. How could they not be prepared? Admiral Chen pulled up a holographic display. Because peace makes armies soft, Ambassador. We've analyzed every piece of intelligence we have on Council military operations over the last century. They haven't fought a peer-level conflict in living memory. Their last real war was 800 years ago. What they call military operations are policing actions against pirates or enforcement missions against isolated colonies that can't fight back. He highlighted several incidents on the timeline. Look at these response times. When they sent fleets to deal with non-compliant species, it took them months to mobilize. Their ships are powerful, yes, but their tactics are straightforward to the point of being predictable. They rely on overwhelming force and superior technology. They've never had to adapt to an enemy that fights back effectively. Are you suggesting Earth could actually win a war against the Galactic Council? Minister Volkov sounded skeptical but interested. No, Chen said bluntly. Not a conventional war. They have too many ships, too many resources. But war isn't just about numbers. It's about will, adaptability, and the willingness to accept costs. Humanity has spent its entire history fighting. We're very, very good at it. The Council has spent 8 centuries not fighting. That's a significant advantage for us if it comes to conflict. Secretary Bradley leaned back in his chair. Walk us through it, Admiral. What would a conflict actually look like? Chen changed the display to show Earth's solar system. If we refuse their terms, they'll likely send an enforcement fleet. Based on their standard procedures, probably 200 to 500 ships. Their goal will be to intimidate us into compliance, not to destroy us. They want our resources and soldiers, after all. Dead humans aren't useful. He zoomed in on Earth's defensive positions. We've spent the last 20 years building orbital defense platforms, automated weapon systems, and a fleet of our own. We have roughly 400 combat-capable ships, plus thousands of smaller vessels that could be weaponized. Our technology isn't as advanced as theirs, but we've designed our systems specifically for defending our home system. Numbers sound almost even, noted Prime Minister Caldwell. That's misleading, Chen continued. Their ships are individually more powerful, but we have advantages they won't expect. First, we're defending. We know every asteroid, every orbit, every hiding spot in this system. Second, we're unified. Every nation on Earth has agreed to combined defense command. They're probably used to divided opposition. He pulled up combat footage from various human conflicts. Third, and most important, we don't fight the way they expect. Watch this. The display showed historical battles from World War II, Vietnam, Afghanistan, and other conflicts where smaller forces had held off or defeated larger ones. Humanity doesn't believe in fair fights. We use ambush tactics, guerrilla warfare, weapons of mass destruction if necessary. We target supply lines, command structures, and morale. And we're willing to accept casualties that would be considered unthinkable by most species. You're talking about suicide tactics, Ambassador Wu said quietly. I'm talking about winning tactics, Chen replied. The kamikaze pilots of World War II. The suicide bombers in various 21st century conflicts. The nuclear standoffs where both sides were willing to destroy the world rather than surrender. Humanity has always been willing to pay terrible prices for victory. I suspect most council species aren't. Elena watched the faces on her screen. Some looked horrified. Others looked thoughtful. A few looked grimly determined. There's another factor, she added. The council isn't popular among many of its member species. We've picked up communications suggesting that a lot of them resent the tribute system. If we refuse and put up a real fight, it might inspire others to resist. The council's whole power structure is based on everyone accepting that resistance is futile. If we prove that wrong, even if we lose, it could start something. Secretary General Okafor raised her hand for silence. Let me make sure I understand. You're recommending that humanity refuse the Council's terms, knowing it will likely lead to military conflict. A conflict we probably can't win in conventional terms, but hoping that we can make resistance costly enough that the Council backs down, or that we inspire other species to rebel. Yes, Elena said simply. That's insane, Ambassador Wu said. That's human, Admiral Chen replied. The debate continued for another 2 hours. Arguments flew back and forth about duty, survival, legacy, and what humanity's first action on the galactic stage should be. Should they be pragmatic and submit, or defiant and resist? Finally, Secretary General Okafor called for a vote. Not a binding one, but a sense of where the international community stood. The question was simple: accept or refuse the Council's terms. The votes came in one by one. It was closer than Elena expected. Some nations voted to accept, citing the risks of confrontation. But slowly, the count tipped the other way. The United States voted to refuse. Russia voted to refuse. The European Union voted to refuse. India, Brazil, Japan, and dozens of other nations followed. When the count was finished, the result was clear. By a margin of almost 2-1, Earth's governments voted to refuse the Galactic Council's tribute demands. The room was silent for a long moment. They had just committed humanity to a path that might lead to war with the most powerful organization in the galaxy. Secretary General Okafor looked directly at the camera, her expression grave. Ambassador Vasquez, you will deliver Earth's response to the Galactic Council. Admiral Chen, begin immediate preparations for system defense. All member nations are to contribute forces to the Unified Defense Command. We may have just declared war on the galaxy, so let's make sure we're ready for it. The session ended, and Elena sat alone in her quarters on the Endeavor. In 12 hours, she would return to the Concordat with Earth's answer. An answer that would shock the Council and possibly change everything. Colonel Webb knocked on her door. Permission to enter? Come in, Marcus. He sat down across from her, holding a datapad. I've finished the tactical analysis you requested. If it comes to a fight, we have a decent chance of winning the first battle. After that, it gets much harder. Show me. Webb pulled up detailed projections. The Council will send what they think is an overwhelming force, probably around 300 ships. They'll expect us to take one look and surrender. Instead, we'll have pre-positioned nuclear mines along their most likely approach vectors. We hit them hard right at the start, take out maybe 50 ships before they can react. He zoomed in on Earth's orbital space. Then we pull back to our defensive platforms, force them to come to us into range of our ground-based weapons. They'll have better shields and weapons, but we'll have numbers and position. Most importantly, we'll have surprise. They won't be expecting us to fight this hard. Casualties? Elena asked. Webb's expression darkened. High. We'll lose a lot of ships and probably some platforms. If they decide to bombard population centers, we could lose millions. But if we can make them bleed, if we can make them doubt whether this is worth the cost, they might withdraw and rethink their approach. And if they don't withdraw? Then we keep fighting until we can't anymore. But Elena, there's something else. I've been analyzing the Council's member species, their history, their cultures. A lot of them have been part of the Council for so long that they've forgotten what it means to be independent. They've never known anything but the tribute system. What are you saying? I'm saying that if we stand up to the Council and survive, even if we don't win, it might inspire others to question the system. The Council's power is based on the belief that resistance is impossible. If we prove that belief wrong, the whole thing might start to crack. Elena thought about that. Humanity's defiance might be about more than just Earth's freedom. It might be about showing the entire galaxy that the Council system wasn't inevitable, that species didn't have to accept subjugation. There's no going back from this, she said quietly. No, Webb agreed. But going forward is what humans do. We've never been good at accepting our place. We always want to see what's over the next hill, what's beyond the next horizon, even if it gets us killed. Elena smiled slightly. Especially if it gets us killed. They sat in silence for a while, watching Earth slowly rotate on the view screen. From this distance it looked peaceful. Beautiful. No signs of the frantic preparations happening across every continent as military forces mobilized and defense systems came online. Do you think we can win? Webb asked. I think we can make them regret picking this fight, Elena replied. Whether that counts as winning, I guess we'll find out. The next 12 hours passed in a blur of preparation. Elena reviewed her speech dozens of times. The message had to be clear, unambiguous, and strong. No room for the Council to think humanity was bluffing or could be persuaded to change their minds. Admiral Chen sent updated tactical data showing Earth's defense network going fully active. Every ship, every platform, every missile battery was ready. If the Council sent their fleet, humanity would be waiting. Finally, it was time. Elena and her team returned to the shuttle and made the journey back to the Concordate. As they approached the massive station, Elena felt a strange calm settle over her. The decision was made. Now came the execution. They docked and made their way back to the Council chamber. It was even more crowded than before. Word had spread about Earth's summons, and apparently many species wanted to see how the newcomers would respond. High Arbiter Zexthor waited on his platform, his yellow eyes tracking Elena as she walked to the central position. He looked confident, even amused, obviously expecting humanity to have accepted reality and prepared to join the Council on its terms. Ambassador Vasquez, his translated voice boomed. Welcome back. I trust Earth has had sufficient time to consider the Council's generous offer. What answer do you bring us? Elena pulled out a small data chip. It was theatrical, old-fashioned, but she wanted there to be no mistake about what came next. She held it up for the entire chamber to see. High Arbiter, members of the Council, I bring Earth's official response to your tribute demands. She inserted the chip into the central podium. Every screen in the chamber lit up, displaying the same message in thousands of languages. The file was small, incredibly small. Just a few bytes of data, because Earth's answer was only one word. The chamber erupted in noise as delegates tried to understand what they were seeing. Some laughed, thinking it was a translation error. Others looked confused, unsure if they were reading it correctly. Zexthor stared at the screen, his expression shifting from amusement to confusion to anger. Explain this, Ambassador. Where's your acceptance? Where are the logistical details? For tribute delivery, what is this? Elena stood straight, her voice clear and strong. That is our complete response to your demands, High Arbiter. No tribute, no submission, no negotiation. Earth appreciates the introduction to galactic society, but we will not bow to threats or accept subjugation disguised as protection. The words still glowed on every screen in the chamber. Simple, direct, unmistakable no. The council chamber descended into chaos. Thousands of voices spoke at once, creating a wall of sound that even the translation system struggled to process. Elena stood calmly on her platform, watching as the aliens reacted to something they clearly hadn't expected. Some were gesturing wildly at the screen, still displaying that single word. Others had turned to their neighbors, apparently trying to confirm what they were seeing was real. High Arbiter Zexthor raised his clawed hands, and the chamber's sound-dampening system activated. Silence fell immediately, his yellow eyes fixed on Elena with an intensity that might have been frightening if she hadn't already committed herself to this course. Ambassador Vasquez, he said, his translator struggling to convey what sounded like barely controlled anger. Perhaps there has been a translation error. Surely Earth understands the gravity of refusing the Council's protection. Let me be perfectly clear about what you are saying no to. He gestured, and a new holographic display filled the space above them. It showed maps of the galaxy, trade routes connecting thousands of systems, fleets of ships moving peacefully between worlds. You are refusing access to the accumulated knowledge of 5,000 years of civilization. You are refusing technologies that would eliminate disease, extend your lifespans, and solve your energy problems. You are refusing the protection of the most powerful military force in galactic history. Zexthor's voice grew harder. And in exchange for what? The privilege of remaining isolated? Of facing pirates, hostile species, and cosmic threats alone? Of watching other species advance while you stagnate? Is this really what Earth wants? Elena had prepared for this. She kept her voice level and professional. High Arbiter, with respect, you're not offering us those things freely. You're demanding we pay for them with our independence. 40% of our resources, our most advanced technology, our citizens to serve as soldiers in your conflicts. That's not protection, that's subjugation. It is the price of civilization. Zexthor's composure cracked slightly. Every species pays this price. Every member of the Council contributes according to their ability. This is how we have maintained peace for 800 years. This is how we ensure prosperity for all. Peace for whom? Elena asked quietly. Prosperity for whom? We've analyzed your system, High Arbiter. The founding species of the Council pay much smaller tributes as a percentage of their wealth. They control the most valuable trade routes. They occupy the seats of real power. Meanwhile, newer species pay heavily for the privilege of serving your interests. That's not a community of equals. That's an empire. A new voice cut through the chamber. She speaks truth, though it is uncomfortable to hear. Elena turned to see one of the council members approaching the central area. She was a Velosian, a species Elena had read about during the voyage. They were humanoid with blue-tinted skin and large black eyes. This particular Velosian wore the robes of a senior council member. According to her identification marker, she was Ambassador Kreath. Zexthor's eyes narrowed. Ambassador Kreath, you overstep. This is a matter between Earth and the Council leadership. It is a matter that affects us all, Kreath replied, not backing down. She turned to address the chamber. How many of us remember when our species first joined the Council? How many of us remember being presented with these same terms, these same demands disguised as offers? And how many of us remember feeling exactly what these humans must feel now? Murmurs spread through the chamber. Elena saw several delegates nodding slightly, though others looked uncomfortable. The difference, Kreath continued, is that none of us said no. We accepted because we believed we had no choice, because we were told that resistance was futile, that submission was the only logical option. But these humans, they dare to do what we did not. They dare to refuse. She pulled up her own holographic display and Elena's breath caught. It showed human history. Wars, battles, revolutions. The images were brutal and violent, showing the worst of what humanity had done to itself over thousands of years. I have studied Earth, Kreath said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. My intelligence division has analyzed their history, their culture, their psychology. And what we have found should concern us all. The display shifted to show nuclear explosions, bombed cities, and casualty statistics that made several council members visibly recoil. This species has spent its entire existence in conflict. They have never known true peace. They have never had a generation without war. They have developed weapons capable of destroying their own world. And they have come within moments of using them. Not once, but many times. Then they are dangerous and should be controlled, Zexthor said. No, Kreath replied. They are dangerous and should not be threatened. There is a difference. Look at their tactics, their strategies, their willingness to accept casualties that we would consider genocidal. These humans have refined warfare to an art form. They practice it constantly, even against themselves. She highlighted specific conflicts. In what they call World War II, they killed over 70 million of their own species. In their nuclear standoffs, they were willing to destroy their entire planet, rather than submit to each other. In countless guerrilla wars, small forces held off armies that outnumbered them hundreds to one through sheer determination and clever tactics. The chamber had gone very quiet. Elena realized that Kreath was doing something unexpected. She was warning the Council about what a war with humanity would really mean. Most species in this chamber, Kreath continued, have been at peace for centuries before joining the Council. They had evolved past major warfare. Conflict for them was small-scale, limited, civilized. But not humans. Humans have been killing each other in innovative ways for their entire history. And now you want to threaten them with military action? The Council's fleets are more than capable of handling one primitive world, Zexthor said, though he sounded less certain now. We have millions of ships, advanced weapons, shields that can withstand anything they could throw at us. Do we? Kreath pulled up tactical data. When was the last time our fleets faced an enemy that fought back with full force? 800 years ago. 800 years of peace. Of policing actions against pirates with outdated weapons. Of enforcement missions against isolated colonies that surrendered after seeing our ships. When did we last face an enemy willing to die rather than submit? Elena decided to press the advantage. If I may, High Arbiter, the ambassador raises an important point. Your fleet may be powerful, but are they ready for an enemy that uses nuclear weapons as point defense? That will sacrifice entire ships to destroy one of yours? That considers mutual destruction an acceptable outcome? You would doom your own people? Zexthor asked, seeming genuinely confused. We would fight for our freedom, Elena replied. There's a difference. Throughout our history, humans have chosen death over slavery again and again. We've fought impossible odds. We've held positions that couldn't be held. won battles that couldn't be won, survived situations that should have killed us, not because we're stronger or smarter, but because we refused to accept defeat. She gestured to the screen, still showing that single word. That's what no means to humanity. It means we're willing to pay whatever price necessary to remain free. You can take our resources by force, but you'll bleed for every shipment. You can occupy our planet, but you'll face resistance that never ends. You can try to break us, but we've been breaking each other for thousands of years and we're still here. This is insanity, said another council member, a being that looked like a floating jellyfish. You would throw away peace, prosperity, and advancement for what? Pride? For the right to choose our own path, Elena said. For the right to make our own mistakes and claim our own victories. For the right to stand as equals rather than subjects. If you can't understand that, then you've been part of the system too long. Zexthor slammed his hand on his podium, creating a booming sound. Enough. The council has been patient with this display of primitive defiance, but I will not allow one backward species to question millennia of peaceful order. You want to refuse our protection? Very well. You will get exactly what you're asking for. He turned to address the full chamber. I call for an immediate vote on initiating enforcement proceedings against Earth. They have refused council membership and demonstrated hostile intent. According to our bylaws, we can authorize military action to secure compliance. All in favor? Lights began appearing across the chamber as delegates voted. Most were green, indicating approval. But Elena noticed something important. A significant minority were red, voting against, and many delegates weren't voting at all, their screens remaining dark. The vote passed, but not by the overwhelming margin Zexthor had clearly expected. Out of thousands of delegates, nearly a third had either voted no or abstained. That was remarkable for a council that was supposed to be unified. The measure passes, Zexthor announced. Fleet Admiral Thunderek will assemble an enforcement fleet and proceed to the Earth system. They will be given one final chance to comply. If they refuse, they will be subdued by force and their government replaced with one more amenable to reason. He looked down at Elena with something that might have been pity. Ambassador Vasquez, you and your delegation will be held here on the Concordat for your own safety during the enforcement action. I hope you understand that what happens next is entirely your species' choice. Submit peacefully, and Earth will be welcomed into the Council. Resist and you will be teaching your children a very painful lesson about the price of pride. Elena had expected this. I'm afraid I must decline your hospitality, High Arbiter. My place is with my people. If the Council sends a fleet to attack Earth, then Earth's ambassador should be there to witness it. That is unacceptable. You will remain here. With respect, High Arbiter, I am not a member of the Council and therefore not subject to your authority. My ship is prepared to depart immediately. If you try to prevent me from leaving, it will be an act of war against a diplomatic mission. I'm sure even the Council has laws about that. Zexthor's eyes narrowed, but he didn't argue. Apparently, even in his anger, he wasn't willing to violate the basic principles of diplomatic immunity. Fine. Return to your dying world, Ambassador. Watch as your people's defiance brings them ruin. And know that you could have prevented it. Elena bowed slightly, mockingly polite. I will tell Earth that the Galactic Council sends its regards. And I will tell them to be ready. Because you're about to learn what happens when you threaten humanity. She turned and walked out of the chamber, her delegation following. The murmur of voices rose behind her, but she didn't look back. They had done what they came to do. Earth had given its answer, and that answer had shaken the Council more than anyone had expected. On the shuttle back to the Endeavour, Colonel Webb was reviewing tactical data on his tablet. Fleet Admiral Thunderek, I've got his service record here. He's commanded 17 enforcement actions over his career. All of them were quick and bloodless. Show up with overwhelming force, watch the target surrender, accept their compliance, leave. He's never actually fought a battle. Good, Elena said. Then he's never fought an enemy that fights back. The fleet will take about 3 weeks to reach Earth, Webb continued. That gives us time to get back and help with final preparations. But Elena, we need to be realistic. Even if we bloody their nose in the first engagement, they can send more fleets. Earth can't win a war of attrition against the entire Council. We don't need to win a war of attrition, Elena replied. She was thinking about Ambassador Kriath's speech, about the way some delegates had voted against enforcement, about the uncertainty she had seen in the chamber. We just need to win the first battle and make it clear that every future battle will cost them. The Council isn't popular with everyone, If we can crack their image of invincibility, other species might start questioning the system. You're trying to start a rebellion, Webb said quietly. I'm trying to show the galaxy that rebellion is possible, Elena corrected. The Council's whole power structure depends on everyone believing they can't be resisted. If we prove that wrong, even if we ultimately lose, it might inspire others to stand up. And if enough species stand up... She didn't finish the sentence, but Webb nodded understanding. The Council couldn't maintain control if too many species refused to comply. Their whole system was built on submission. Defiance was contagious. The Endeavor broke away from the Concordat and engaged its faster-than-light drive. As the station shrank behind them, Elena thought about what she had just done. She had committed humanity to a war it probably couldn't win. She had rejected peace and prosperity in favor of a fight for independence. History would either remember her as a hero or as the fool who doomed Earth. But as she thought about that word still glowing in the Council chamber, that simple, defiant, very human word, she knew she had made the right choice. Some things were worth fighting for. Some things were worth dying for. Freedom was one of them. The journey back to Earth took 20 days. The crew used every minute preparing. Combat drills, tactical simulations, weapons checks. They analyzed what little they knew about Council fleet tactics and developed counters. They planned ambushes, fallback positions, and desperate last stands, and they watched the news feeds from Earth. The planet was mobilizing like never before. Every nation had committed its military forces to the Unified Defense Command. Factories were running triple shifts producing missiles, drones, and ammunition. Civilian ships were being retrofitted with weapons. The entire solar system was becoming a fortress. Public opinion on Earth was divided. Some people were terrified, certain they were about to be destroyed for the sake of pride. Others were defiant, echoing the sentiment that humanity would never bow. Protests and rallies filled cities across the globe. Some demanded the government reconsider. Others demanded they stand firm. But everyone was preparing, because whatever they thought about the decision, humanity was about to face its first test on the galactic stage. Win or lose, the galaxy would remember what happened when someone told humanity no. And humanity said no right back. As the Endeavor approached Earth, Elena stood at the viewport and looked at her home. It had never looked more beautiful or more fragile. Soon, one of the most powerful forces in the galaxy would be coming here to punish Earth for its defiance. She just hoped that Admiral Chen and Colonel Webb were right. That humanity's violent history, its refusal to accept defeat, its willingness to fight dirty and die hard, would be enough to make the Council regret this decision. One word had shattered the Council's expectations and challenged millennia of unquestioned authority. Now they would see if one species could back up that word with action. Fleet Admiral Thunrek stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Harmony, and watched as 300 Council warships emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of Earth's solar system. The display before him showed a small, yellow star with a collection of planets, one of which was inhabited by the stubborn primitives who had dared to refuse the Council's generous offer. He had done this 17 times before. Show up with an overwhelming force, broadcast demands, watch the local government scramble to comply. Usually it took less than an hour. Occasionally, some particularly foolish species would fire a few token shots, then surrender after their primitive weapons accomplished nothing against Council shields. Either way, the result was always the same. Thunrek was a Corvin, a species that had been part of the Council for over 2,000 years. He stood nearly 4 meters tall, with 4 arms and thick armor plating that was as much ceremonial as functional. He had never personally fired a weapon in anger. He had never needed to. The mere presence of a Council fleet was usually enough. "Commander," he said to his second-in-command, "scan the system. Show me their defenses." The tactical officer, a crystalline being named Shira, manipulated the controls. "Sir, I'm reading multiple orbital platforms around the third planet. Approximately 200 defensive stations with what appear to be missile batteries and energy weapons. Also detecting a fleet of smaller ships in various orbital positions. Current count is 470 vessels." Thunrek chuckled. 470 ships against our 300? They don't understand the difference in capabilities. Our shields alone could withstand anything they can produce. What about their technology level? Primitive by our standards, sir. They only achieved faster-than-light travel 47 years ago. Their energy weapons appear to be early-stage plasma or laser systems. Their ships are small, mostly under 500 meters in length. Our capital ships are 3 times that size with exponentially greater firepower. Then this will be over quickly. Thunrek settled into his command chair. Open a communication channel to Earth. Let's give them one last chance to see reason. The channel opened, and after a moment, a human face appeared on the screen. It was a male, older, with gray hair and wearing what appeared to be a military uniform. The human looked tired but determined. This is Admiral James Chen of the United Earth Space Defense Force. You're in our system without permission. State your intentions. Thunrek found the human's tone amusing, as if they were equals. I am Fleet Admiral Thunrek of the Galactic Council. We are here to enforce compliance with Council membership requirements. Your Ambassador Vasquez refused our generous terms. We are here to show you the consequences of that refusal and offer you one final opportunity to submit peacefully. Chen's expression didn't change. Then I'm afraid you've wasted your time, Admiral. Earth's answer remains the same. We will not submit to your tribute demands. We will not surrender our independence, leave our system immediately, or face the consequences. Thunrek laughed. Several of his bridge crew joined him. Consequences? You have primitive ships and outdated weapons facing the might of the Galactic Council. What consequences could you possibly pose to us? The human admiral smiled, and something about that smile made Thunrek's amusement fade slightly. It was the smile of someone who knew something you didn't. You're about to find out, Chen said. I'll give you the same chance you gave us. Turn your fleet around and leave. This is your only warning. You dare? Thunrek stood from his chair. You face 300 warships, each capable of leveling a city. Surrender now or we will destroy your defensive platforms and occupy your planet. This is not a negotiation. No, Chen agreed. It's not. Communications, send the signal. The transmission cut off. Thunrek stared at the blank screen for a moment, then turned to his tactical officer. Foolish primitives. All ships advance to weapons range. Prepare to disable their platforms. Try not to kill too many. We'll need some of them alive to operate their industries once we take control. The Council fleet began moving forward in perfect formation. 300 ships, their shields glowing with power, their weapons priming. It was a sight that had made civilization surrender for centuries. Then space exploded. Multiple nuclear detonations. Shira screamed. Sir, the space ahead of us is filling with radiation and debris. Thunrek grabbed his chair for support as the Eternal Harmony's shields flared, absorbing energy from what appeared to be dozens of nuclear weapons detonating simultaneously. The view screen showed space ahead turning white with nuclear fire. How did they mine our approach vector? Thunrek demanded. We only just arrived. They must have seeded the area with devices after choosing the most likely approach path, Shira replied, her crystalline form flickering with stress colors. Sir, damage reports coming in. The shields are holding, but several ships in the vanguard took damage. The Serene Dawn reports shield failure and hull breaches. The Peaceful Resolution has lost engine power. 2 ships damaged from primitive nuclear weapons. Thunrek couldn't believe it. How is that possible? The explosions weren't meant to destroy us directly, his science officer called out. They're creating a debris field and radiation interference. Our sensors are compromised. And sir, I'm reading massive energy buildups from the orbital platforms around Earth. The human defenses opened fire. Thousands of missiles streaked out from the platforms, far more than the initial scans had suggested. The Council fleet's point defense systems engaged, destroying the incoming projectiles. But there were so many of them. Some are getting through, Shira reported. Multiple impacts across the fleet. Shields holding but taking damage. Sir, these aren't normal missiles. Some of them are accelerating to near relativistic speeds. If they impact at those velocities.
Even our shields might not. The Eternal Harmony shook violently as something hit its forward shield at an appreciable fraction of light speed.
Alarms blared across the bridge. Shield at 60%, Shira called out. Sir, recommend we fall back and reassess. Fall back? Thunrek's pride warred with tactical sense. We outnumber them. We have superior technology. We will not retreat from primitives. But the humans weren't fighting like primitives. As the Council fleet pushed forward, human ships emerged from behind asteroids, from orbital positions that the sensors had missed, even from inside the debris field created by their own nuclear mines. They swarmed like insects, dozens of small ships targeting individual Council vessels. "They're using kamikaze tactics," someone on the bridge shouted. 3 human ships just rammed the rising tide. Her shields couldn't handle the kinetic impact. She's breaking apart. Thunrek watched in horror as the Council ship, a beautiful vessel that had served for 300 years, was torn apart by the sacrifice of 3 primitive human vessels that had accelerated to maximum speed, and simply crashed into it. The humans had turned their own ships into weapons. "All ships tight formation," Thunrek ordered. "Concentrate point defense. Don't let them get close," but the humans adapted. Their AI-controlled drones swarmed in first, drawing fire from the point defense systems. Then their manned ships came in during the reload cycles, firing missiles at close range where the Council's long-range weapons couldn't track fast enough. It was chaos. Beautiful, terrible chaos. The kind of warfare Thunrek had only read about in ancient histories. The kind of warfare that civilized species had evolved beyond. "Sir, the humans are using nuclear weapons at close range." Shira's voice was panicked now. "They're detonating them near their own ships. They don't care about their own casualties." A human vessel accelerated toward a cluster of Council ships, fired all its missiles, then detonated what appeared to be multiple nuclear warheads inside its own hull. The explosion took out 2 Council ships whose shields had already been weakened by the conventional attacks. "They're insane," Thunrek whispered. "They're actually insane." The battle that was supposed to be a quick show of force had turned into a nightmare. The humans fought like nothing the Council had faced in living memory. They used the asteroids for cover. They sacrificed ships without hesitation. They employed weapons that endangered their own forces. They fought with a ferocity that seemed more suited to cornered animals than sentient beings. "Fleet-wide communication," Thunrek ordered. "All ships fighting retreat. Fall back to the outer system. We need to reassess." "Sir, the humans are pursuing." Of course they were. Thunrek watched as human ships chased his fleet, firing missiles and continuing their aggressive tactics even as they took casualties. They were outnumbered in terms of firepower, but they fought like they were winning. The running tide, a destroyer that had been part of the vanguard, suffered a catastrophic shield failure and was swarmed by a dozen human ships. They tore it apart with concentrated fire, celebrating their kill even as Council weapons destroyed half of them in return. "Casualty report," Thunrek said quietly as the fleet finally managed to pull back beyond immediate weapons range. Shira's voice shook as she read the numbers. 47 ships destroyed or disabled. Another 30 with significant damage. We've lost approximately 15% of our fleet strength in less than 3 hours of engagement. 15%. Against primitives, against a species that had barely reached the stars. It was impossible. It was humiliating. It was terrifying. What about the humans? Their casualties are higher. Approximately 120 ships destroyed. But sir, they seem to consider this acceptable. They're reforming their formations and their defensive platforms are still fully operational. Thunrek slumped in his chair. He had been so certain this would be simple. Show up, make threats, watch them surrender. Instead, he had lost nearly 50 ships and the humans were still fighting. "Open a channel to the Council," he said finally. "We need reinforcements." The transmission took several minutes to reach the Concordat due to the distance. When High Arbiter Zexthor appeared on the screen, he looked confident. Clearly, he had been expecting news of a quick victory. "Admiral Thunrek, report. Has Earth surrendered?" "No, High Arbiter. They have not. We have engaged in combat and encountered unexpectedly fierce resistance. I am requesting additional fleets to complete the pacification." Zexthor's expression shifted from confidence to confusion to anger. "You have 300 ships. How can a single primitive world resist the might of the Council fleet?" "They fight like nothing we have faced before," Thunrek tried to explain. "They use suicide tactics. They mine space with nuclear weapons. They sacrifice their own forces without hesitation to destroy ours. They don't fight to win, High Arbiter. They fight to kill as many of us as possible regardless of cost to themselves." There was a long silence. Finally, Zexthor spoke. "How many ships have you lost?" 47 destroyed, 30 damaged. Another silence. Thunrek could see the High Arbiter processing this information, trying to reconcile it with his expectations. Fall back, Zexthor said finally. Maintain position at the edge of their system, but do not engage further. I need to consult with the council leadership. This situation has become more complicated than anticipated. The transmission ended. Thunrek looked around his bridge at his shaken crew. They were the pride of the council, trained in the finest academies, equipped with technology that made them superior to nearly every species in the galaxy. And they had just been bloodied by humans using primitive ships and pure aggression. Sir, Shira said quietly, the humans are broadcasting a message. Audio only. Play it. Admiral Chen's voice filled the bridge. Fleet Admiral Thunrek, this is your second warning. Leave our system now. You came here to show us the consequences of defiance. Instead, we've shown you the cost of threatening humanity. We didn't want this fight, but since you brought it to us, we're going to finish it. Come closer and we'll destroy more of your ships. Try to bombard our planet and we'll turn this entire system into your graveyard. This is what happens when you pick a fight with humans. We don't surrender. We don't negotiate. We fight until you leave or until one of us is dead. Your choice. The message ended. Thunrek sat in the command chair and tried to think of what to do next. He had been trained in tactics, strategy, and command. But he had never been trained for this. No one in the council had been trained for this. Because no one in the council had fought a real war in 800 years. They had forgotten what it meant to face an enemy that refused to quit. An enemy that measured victory not by territories gained or objectives achieved, but by how much damage they could inflict before they fell. An enemy that had spent their entire history perfecting the art of killing. The humans had grown up in a galaxy of one world, where the only enemies were other humans. So they had learned to fight humans, and humans, Thunrek was beginning to realize, were very, very good at war. Looking at the casualty reports, at the images of destroyed council ships, at the human defensive platform still standing and ready for another round, Thunrek understood something that the council leadership needed to learn quickly. Earth had said no, and Earth was willing to make that no stick no matter what it cost. On the bridge of the UNSS Endeavour, now in high orbit above Earth, Elena Vasquez watched the tactical display showing the council fleet pulling back. Beside her, Admiral Chen allowed himself a small smile. They weren't expecting that, he said. No, Elena agreed. They were expecting us to fold. They've never faced a species that fights back with everything it has, but now they know. This isn't over, Chen warned. They'll regroup, call for reinforcements, come back with a larger fleet. I know, Elena said. But we've bought time, and more importantly, we've shown them that humans don't break easily. The word will spread across the council. The species that said no. The species that made the council bleed. That message is going to reach a lot of ears. You think it will make a difference? Elena thought about Ambassador Kriath, about the delegates who had voted against enforcement, about all the species paying tribute to maintain a system that enriched the council's founders.
I think we've planted a seed, she said.
Whether it grows into something that changes the galaxy, we'll have to wait and see. But at least now, other species know that resistance is possible. The council isn't invincible. They can be hurt. They can be stopped. She looked down at Earth, at the planet that had just fought off the most powerful force in the known galaxy, the planet that had refused to bow. We said no, Elena whispered. And we meant it. The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been running for 6 hours, and High Arbiter Zexthor could feel his authority crumbling with every passing minute. The council chamber, usually a place of orderly debate and predictable outcomes, had descended into something he had never witnessed in his 200 years of service. Open rebellion, 47 ships, Ambassador Kriath's voice rang out across the chamber. 47 council vessels destroyed by a single primitive world that has been in space for less than 50 years. And you want to send more ships? How many more must die to maintain this charade? A chorus of voices rose in support. Not all of them, but enough to be significant. Species that had never questioned the council's decisions were now standing up and demanding answers. The humans attacked our peacekeeping fleet, Zexthor argued, though his voice carried less certainty than before. They are the aggressors. They refused our generous terms and then murdered council personnel. They must be brought to justice. Justice? A delegate from the Therian Collective stood up, his insectoid body clicking with agitation. We call it justice when we demand 40% of a species' resources? When we take their citizens as soldiers? When we threaten them with destruction if they refuse? What word would we use if someone did this to us? It is the system that has maintained peace for 800 years, Zexthor said, falling back on the familiar argument. But it sounded hollow now even to his own ears. Peace for whom? Another voice, this time from the Azurian delegation. My species has paid tribute for 300 years. In that time, our homeworld has grown poorer while council founders grow richer. We are told this is the price of protection, but protection from what? The only threat we face is from the council itself if we refuse to pay. Zexthor saw the careful order he had maintained beginning to fracture. The tribute system had always worked because no one questioned it. New species joined, paid their dues, and eventually became established enough to reduce their burden. It was a pyramid, with the oldest members at the top benefiting from the contributions of those below. But the whole structure depended on everyone accepting it as inevitable. The humans had shattered that acceptance by refusing and then making the council bleed for trying to enforce compliance. They had shown that the system could be resisted. Now species that had paid for centuries were asking why they had never tried to say no. We must maintain unity, Zexthor pleaded. If we allow one species to refuse, others will follow. The entire structure of galactic civilization will collapse. Then perhaps it should, Kriath said quietly. Perhaps a structure built on forced compliance and tribute deserves to fall. The humans have shown us something we had forgotten, that there are things worth fighting for, that freedom has value beyond convenience. That saying no is always an option, even when facing overwhelming force. The chamber erupted in argument. Some delegates supported Zexthor, warning of chaos and disorder if the tribute system was dismantled. Others supported Kriath, calling for reform or complete restructuring. And many remained silent, calculating which side would ultimately win and where their interests lay. In the middle of this chaos, a new transmission arrived. It was from the Velosian Confederation, Ambassador Kriath's government. The message was brief and shocking. The Velosian Confederation was formally withdrawing from the Galactic Council, effective immediately. They would no longer pay tribute, no longer provide ships for council operations, and no longer recognize council authority over their territory. They invited other species who desired independence to join them in forming a new alliance based on mutual cooperation rather than forced compliance. The chamber went silent. In 3,000 years of council history, no major species had ever voluntarily left. There had been expulsions, species removed for violating council law. But a voluntary departure, especially by a species as influential as the Velosians, was unprecedented. Kriath stood calmly as her delegation prepared to leave. My government has decided that the human example is one worth following. We will not fight the council, but we will no longer serve it. Other species are free to make their own choices. But the Velosian people choose freedom. She walked out, her delegation following. For a moment no one moved. Then another delegate stood up. The representative from the Kyrian Assembly announced they were also withdrawing. Then the Nethian Alliance. Then 3 smaller species together. By the end of the day, 12 species had formally withdrawn from the council. Dozens more had demanded emergency referendums to allow their populations to vote on continued membership. The galactic news networks were exploding with coverage. The Battle of Sol, as it was being called, had become a symbol, not of human victory, but of the possibility of resistance. High Arbiter Zexthor watched his empire crumbling and knew he had 2 choices. Double down, send a massive fleet to Earth and crush them as an example, risking further rebellion and potentially a real war, or accept that the system he had maintained was broken and needed to change. Neither option was acceptable. But as he looked at the empty seats where loyal delegates had sat for centuries, he realized that the decision might be out of his hands. On Earth, Elena Vasquez stood before the United Nations General Assembly and delivered her report on the Battle of Sol. The casualties had been significant. 123 ships destroyed, over 15,000 people dead. Multiple orbital platforms damaged. Cities on high alert for potential bombardment that, thankfully, never came. But Earth had survived. More than survived. They had sent the Council fleet running. The Council has not returned, Elena told the assembled representatives. Our intelligence suggests they are dealing with internal problems. Multiple species have withdrawn from the Council in protest of the tribute system. Others are demanding reforms. What started as Earth saying no has become a galactic movement questioning the entire structure of Council authority. Secretary General Okafor addressed the assembly. We did not seek this fight. We simply refused to surrender our independence. But in doing so, we have apparently inspired others to question their own subjugation. The galaxy is changing, and Earth is at the center of that change. The assembly debated long into the night about what to do next. Some argued for fortifying defenses, expecting the Council to return with a larger fleet. Others suggested reaching out to the species that had withdrawn, forming alliances, building a coalition of free worlds to counter Council power. In the end, they decided to do both. Earth would continue strengthening its defenses while simultaneously engaging in diplomacy with other species. If the Council wanted war, Earth would be ready. But if the Council wanted peace, it would be peace between equals, not between master and subject. Admiral Chen led the military preparations. New ships were built, incorporating lessons learned from the first battle. Defensive platforms were expanded and upgraded. The asteroid belt was seeded with more weapons, more sensors, more surprises for any fleet that dared approach Earth again. But it was Elena's diplomatic efforts that proved most significant. She reached out to the Velosian Confederation first. Ambassador Kriath responded warmly, suggesting a meeting on neutral ground to discuss cooperation. Other species followed. The Kyrians, the Nethians, and even some species still technically part of the Council, but exploring their options. 3 months after the Battle of Sol, Elena stood on a space station in neutral territory, hosting the first meeting of what they were calling the Free Worlds Alliance. Representatives from 15 species gathered to discuss an alternative to the Council's tribute system. We're not trying to replace the Council, Elena explained. We're trying to create an alternative, a framework for cooperation based on mutual benefit, rather than forced compliance. Free trade, defensive alliances, shared technology, but no tribute, no forced military service, no surrender of independence. Ambassador Kriath nodded in agreement. The Council model worked when the galaxy was younger and more dangerous. But we have outgrown the need for a central authority that demands submission in exchange for protection. It is time for something new. The representatives debated for days. Some species were cautious, worried about Council retaliation. Others were enthusiastic, seeing an opportunity to escape centuries of tribute. Slowly, carefully, they began drafting the foundation of what would become a new galactic order. Meanwhile, the Galactic Council was tearing itself apart. More species withdrew every week. High Arbiter Zexthor tried to maintain control, but his authority was evaporating. The founding species, the ones who had benefited most from the tribute system, demanded action. Send the full might of the Council fleet to Earth, they argued. Destroy this rebellion before it spreads further. But others counseled caution. The military commanders who had reviewed the Battle of Sol reports were less confident than before. The humans had fought with a ferocity that suggested they would turn their entire system into a death trap before surrendering. And with multiple species now in open rebellion, committing the full fleet to Earth meant leaving other territories vulnerable. The Council was paralyzed by indecision and internal conflict. For the first time in centuries, they faced a problem that couldn't be solved by simply showing up with overwhelming force. 6 months after the Battle of Sol, Zexthor received an official communication from the Free Worlds Alliance. It was an invitation to talks. Not surrender terms. Not a plea for mercy. An invitation to negotiate as equals. He stared at the message for a long time. Everything in his training, his experience, his understanding of how the galaxy worked, told him to refuse. The Council did not negotiate with rebels. The Council crushed opposition and maintained order. But as he looked at the status reports showing 43 species now withdrawn from the Council, with 17 more holding referendums on membership, he realized that crushing opposition was no longer an option. The old order was dying. The only question was whether something better would replace it, or whether the galaxy would descend into chaos. Reluctantly, bitterly, Zexthor accepted the invitation. The peace talks were held on the same neutral station where the Free Worlds Alliance had formed. It was deeply symbolic. The Council, which had dictated terms to countless species, now came to negotiate. Elena led the human delegation. Kriath represented the Velosian Confederation and the broader alliance, and Zexthor came with a small group of Council representatives looking older and more worn than when Elena had first met him. You have brought chaos to the galaxy, Zexthor said as the talks began. Centuries of peace and order disrupted because one species was too proud to accept their place. We disrupted a system that was unjust, Elena replied calmly. Peace built on subjugation isn't true peace. It's just delayed conflict. You force species to pay tribute, to surrender their sovereignty, to serve your interests. Did you really think that would last forever? It lasted 800 years. And it could have lasted 800 more if you had been willing to evolve. But you weren't. You held on to your power, your privileges, your tribute, even as the galaxy changed. We didn't destroy the Council Arbiter. The Council destroyed itself by refusing to adapt. The negotiations were difficult. The Council representatives wanted to maintain as much of the old system as possible. The Alliance representatives demanded fundamental reforms. Elena found herself in the role of mediator, trying to find common ground between those who wanted revolution and those who feared it. Weeks passed. The talks almost collapsed several times, but slowly, painfully, a new framework began to emerge. The tribute system would be abolished for all species. No more forced payments, no more mandatory military service. The Council would transition from a hierarchical empire to a true confederation of equals. Species could choose their level of involvement, from full membership with voting rights to simple trading partnerships with no political obligations. The most difficult issue was enforcement. How would the new system maintain order without the threat of overwhelming force? Through cooperation and mutual interest, Kriath proposed. Instead of forcing compliance, we offer benefits that make cooperation attractive. Free access to trade networks, shared technology development, collective defense against genuine threats. Species join because they want to, not because they're afraid not to. And if species choose conflict? Zexthor asked. If they attack others, if they threaten peace, how do we respond without central authority? We defend ourselves and our allies, Elena said. But we don't conquer. We don't occupy. We don't impose our system on others. We show them that cooperation works better than domination. And if they still choose violence, then they face the combined response of free species working together, not subjects following orders. It was a radical shift from everything the Council had been. But as the talks continued, even some of the Council representatives began to see the wisdom in it. The old system was broken. Something new had to replace it. 3 months after the talks began, they reached an agreement. The Galactic Council would be dissolved. In its place would be the Galactic Confederation, an alliance of free and equal species. The founding members included the old Council core species, the Free Worlds Alliance, and dozens of species who had been waiting to see which way the wind blew. High Arbiter Zexthor resigned his position. He had been the face of the old order, and the new one needed new leadership. The first election for Confederation president was held, and to many people's surprise, Ambassador Kriath won in a landslide. She had stood up to the Council, spoken truth to power, and helped craft the new system. She represented the future. At her inauguration, Kriath gave a speech that was broadcast across the galaxy. Today marks the end of 800 years of enforced peace and the beginning of something better. True peace built on cooperation rather than fear. The humans taught us a lesson we needed to learn. That freedom matters. That dignity matters. That some things are worth fighting for. She looked directly at the cameras, at the billions of beings watching across thousands of worlds. One species said no. One word changed everything. Let us build a galaxy where every species has the right to say no and the right to say yes. Where we stand together not because we must, but because we choose to. The transition wasn't easy. Some species that had grown dependent on the tribute system struggled initially. Pirates and raiders, no longer kept in check by overwhelming council force, became bolder. There were conflicts, disputes, and growing pains, but slowly the new system stabilized. Species found that cooperation brought more benefits than tribute had. Trade flourished as barriers fell. Technology advanced as species shared knowledge freely instead of hoarding it. And when genuine threats appeared, the Confederation's voluntary defense forces proved surprisingly effective, motivated by protecting their homes rather than following orders. Earth became a symbol of the new era, the world that had said no and meant it. The species that had shown the galaxy that resistance was possible. Human ships traveled across the Confederation, welcomed now as equals rather than viewed as primitives. Elena Vasquez retired from active diplomacy, but remained an advisor to the Earth government. She watched with satisfaction as humanity took its place among the stars, not as subjects but as partners. One day, 5 years after the Battle of Sol, she received a visitor at her home in Geneva. It was Zexthor. The former High Arbiter looked smaller somehow, less imposing than he had in the council chamber. "Ambassador Vasquez," he said formally. "I hope I am not intruding." "Not at all," Elena replied, surprised but welcoming. "Please come in. Can I offer you anything?" They sat in her garden, looking out over Lake Geneva. For a long moment, neither spoke. Finally, Zexthor broke the silence. "I came to apologize." Elena looked at him in surprise. "Apologize? For threatening your world. For being too blind to see that the system I served was unjust. For valuing order over freedom. You tried to tell me and I wouldn't listen. It took the destruction of the system I had dedicated my life to for me to understand." Elena considered her words carefully. "You were a product of your time, Arbiter. The council system worked for centuries. It brought peace, stability, prosperity for many. It's not that it was entirely wrong. It's that it had outlived its usefulness and needed to change. But it took your species with your violent history and stubborn defiance to force that change. Do you know what troubles me most?" Zexthor looked at her with his yellow eyes, and she saw sadness in them. It wasn't that humans said no. Many species probably wanted to say no over the centuries. It was that you meant it. You were willing to die for it. And we, the civilized galaxy, had become so comfortable, so complacent that we couldn't understand that kind of conviction anymore. "Maybe that's the real lesson," Elena said. "Civilization shouldn't make you soft. It shouldn't make you forget what principles are worth defending. The galaxy needed someone to remind it that freedom matters, even if that someone was a species that had barely reached the stars." Zexthor nodded slowly. "Your species frightens many in the Confederation. You are so young, so aggressive, so willing to fight. But I think that's exactly what we needed. A reminder that peace without the will to defend it is just surrender in slow motion." He stood to leave, then paused. "That word you transmitted. That single word that shattered the council. Do you know how many species have adopted it as a symbol? How many worlds now display it as a reminder that they are free?" Elena smiled. "No, the word isn't about humans. It's about the idea that everyone, every species, every individual, has the right to refuse what's unjust, to stand up for what they believe in, to fight if necessary for their freedom. We just happen to be the first ones to say it out loud in a very long time." After Zexthor left, Elena sat in her garden and thought about everything that had happened. One word. One simple, defiant, very human word had changed the entire galaxy. Not because it was profound or eloquent, but because it represented a truth the galaxy had forgotten. That submission is always a choice. That resistance is always possible. That freedom is worth fighting for. Her communicator chimed. It was Admiral Chen, now retired like her. "Elena, are you watching the news?" "No, why?" "The Confederation just opened a new academy for joint military training. They're teaching tactics, strategy, asymmetric warfare. They're calling it the Sol Academy. They want humanity to teach the galaxy how to fight." Elena laughed. From threats of destruction to requests for military training. That's quite a change. They learned the lesson. A civilization that can't defend itself will eventually be conquered by external enemies or internal corruption. And humans, for better or worse, are very good at teaching people how to fight. Let's hope they also learn when not to fight, Elena said. That's the harder lesson. She ended the call and looked up at the stars. Earth had come to those stars expecting to find wonders and new friends. Instead, they had found an empire that demanded submission. And by refusing that submission, they had helped birth something better. The galaxy was far from perfect. There were still conflicts, still problems, still species that struggled with the transition from the old order to the new. But it was better. It was freer. It gave every species the chance to determine their own destiny. All because humanity had looked at the most powerful organization in the galaxy and said one word. No. Elena smiled and whispered to herself, and we meant it. Across the galaxy on thousands of worlds, the story of Earth's defiance had become legend. Children grew up hearing about the species that said no. Artists created work celebrating the Battle of Sol. Historians analyzed how one word had shattered centuries of established order. But for Elena, for Admiral Chen, for all the humans who had lived through those tense months when war seemed inevitable, it wasn't legend. It was a choice they had made, a choice that could have doomed their world but instead had freed a galaxy, The story of humanity's entry onto the galactic stage would be told for generations. How they achieved faster than light travel and reached the stars with hope and wonder. How they met the Galactic Council and were offered subjugation disguised as membership. How they answered with a single word that echoed across the galaxy. And how that word changed everything. In the end, it wasn't about humanity being special or superior. It was about the power of conviction. About standing for something even when it would be easier to bow. About remembering that freedom is never given, only taken, and must be defended. The humans hadn't just joined the galactic community. They had transformed it. They had reminded civilizations that had grown comfortable and complacent what their ancestors once knew. That liberty is precious. That independence is worth fighting for. That sometimes the right answer to tyranny, no matter how powerful or how ancient, is simply and completely no. Captain James Wright stood at the viewport of his brother's home, looking out at the sprawling colony of New Eden. The settlement stretched across the valley floor, its buildings gleaming in the light of Epsilon Eridani, a star not unlike Earth's sun but with a distinct orange tint that gave the colony its unique glow. After 6 months in the cramped quarters of his scout ship, the open spaces and fresh air of New Eden felt like paradise. "More coffee?" asked Robert, his older brother, appearing at his side with a steaming pot. James nodded and held out his cup. "Thanks, I still can't believe how much this place has grown. 3 million people now?" 3.2 million according to last month's count, Robert said with pride. He had been among the first wave of colonists 15 years ago, when New Eden was nothing but prefab shelters and ambitious plans. Now his wife Lisa managed one of the colony's largest hydroponic farms, and their 10-year-old son Michael attended a school that rivaled Earth's finest. "Uncle James!" Michael came running into the room holding a small model spaceship. "Is this one like yours?" James knelt down and examined the toy with exaggerated seriousness. "Almost, but mine doesn't have these fancy guns on the side. My scout ship is built for speed, not fighting." "But what if you meet aliens?" Michael asked, his eyes wide. "In 200 years of space exploration, we haven't found any intelligent alien life," James replied, ruffling the boy's hair. "Just plants and simple animals." The colony's emergency siren chose that moment to blare, its wailing sound cutting through the peaceful morning. James froze, years of military training kicking in. Robert moved to the window, confusion on his face. "Probably another drill," Robert said, but his voice lacked conviction. James was already reaching for his communicator when the sky turned blood red. A massive shadow fell across the colony as something enormous moved into position above New Eden. "Get to the shelter," James ordered, military authority replacing his relaxed demeanor. "Now!" The colony's defense systems came online, a network of ground-based energy cannons that could handle pirate ships or asteroids. They fired upward at the massive object, but the beams seemed to dissolve harmlessly against an invisible barrier. James's communicator buzzed with an incoming colony-wide broadcast. "Unidentified vessels detected in orbit. This is not a drill. All citizens proceed to emergency shelters immediately." Robert grabbed Michael while Lisa rushed in from the kitchen. "What's happening?" she asked, fear in her eyes. Before James could answer, a beam of intense blue light shot down from the ship above, striking the colony's main power plant. The explosion rattled windows throughout the settlement, and the lights flickered before emergency power kicked in. "We need to get to my ship," James said, making a quick decision. "It's at the spaceport on the eastern edge. If we hurry..." Another explosion, closer this time, knocked them off their feet. Through the window, James saw more beams striking key points around the colony. The defense control center, the communications array, the spaceport. "They're taking out our infrastructure," he muttered, military training helping him analyze the attack pattern. "This isn't random. They know exactly what they're targeting." "Who are they?" Lisa asked, holding Michael close. "I don't know," James admitted. "But we need to move." The family rushed to Robert's ground vehicle, a sturdy transport designed for the colony's rough terrain. As they drove through increasingly chaotic streets, James tried to contact his crew at the spaceport. Static was his only answer. Above them, smaller craft were now descending from the massive ship, sleek angular vessels that moved with impossible speed. They fired more precisely, targeting defense installations and government buildings. The secondary spaceport, James said suddenly. The one they use for maintenance. My scout ship isn't there, but there might be something we can use. Robert nodded grimly and changed direction, driving away from the colony center where most of the destruction was concentrated. The secondary spaceport was little more than a collection of hangars and repair bays at the edge of the settlement, used primarily for service and emergency landings. As they approached, a message came through, on all frequencies in perfect Earth Standard language. Your expansion ends here. Return to your homeworld or face extinction. The voice was flat, emotionless, with an artificial quality that suggested translation technology. They're talking to us, Lisa whispered. Actual aliens. Not very friendly ones, James replied, scanning the spaceport ahead. Most of the ships were undergoing repairs, but he spotted a transport vessel that looked operational. There, that supply runner might have enough fuel to reach the jump point. The spaceport was deserted, its workers having fled to shelters or been caught in the initial attack. James used his military override codes to access the transport ship, a blocky vessel designed to carry goods rather than people, but equipped with basic life support. Everyone inside, he ordered, helping Lisa and Michael up the ramp while Robert gathered emergency supplies from a nearby storage locker. Through the viewports, they could see more devastating beams striking the colony. Buildings collapsed, and fire spread rapidly through residential areas. The colony's limited defensive fire was weakening as more installations were destroyed. James powered up the transport systems, praying that its engines would respond. The ship hummed to life and relief washed over him, until a shadow fell across the cockpit. One of the alien vessels hovered directly overhead, its weapons ports glowing with energy. "Hang on!" James shouted, slamming the thrust controls forward. Die. Transport lurched out of the hangar moments before a beam struck where they had been, vaporizing the structure. James guided the ungainly vessel upward, pushing its engines beyond safe limits. The alien craft pursued, but seemed more interested in continuing the colony assault than chasing one fleeing ship. As they climbed through the atmosphere, the full horror became clear. The alien vessel was enormous, at least 10 kilometers long, with dozens of smaller craft swarming around it. And it wasn't alone. 2 more ships of similar size were positioned around the colony. "They're going to destroy everything," Robert said, his voice hollow as he watched through the rear viewport. James activated the transport's long-range sensors, recording everything they could detect about the alien ships: energy signatures, composition, weapons capabilities. It wasn't much, but it might give Earth a fighting chance when, these beings attacked again. The transport shuddered as it pushed beyond the atmosphere. James set course for the system's jump point, where they could enter faster than light travel back to the nearest human outpost. "We can't just leave," Lisa protested, tears streaming down her face. "We have to warn Earth," James replied grimly. "We're the only ones who can." As the transport limped toward the jump point, they watched through the sensors as the alien ships methodically reduced New Eden to ash. The colony that had taken decades to build was destroyed in hours, 3 million lives erased. Michael slept fitfully in his mother's arms, unaware that his home no longer existed. Robert and Lisa sat in stunned silence, occasionally reaching for each other's hands. James stored the sensor data and prepared the jump calculations. His military training kept him functioning despite the shock and grief. One thought burned in his mind, growing from a spark to a raging fire. They would pay for this. Humanity would not cower. Humanity would not retreat. For every soul lost on New Eden, 1,000 ships would answer. The journey back to Earth took 6 days in the stolen transport ship. 6 days of nightmares for James, his mind replaying the destruction of New Eden each time he closed his eyes. 6 days of watching his brother's family grieve for their home and friends. 6 days of planning what he would say to Earth's leaders. When they finally reached Earth orbit, they were met by a military escort. News of New Eden's silence had already reached the home planet, but no one knew what had happened. The sight of a civilian transport arriving instead of Captain Wright's scout ship had raised immediate concerns. Admiral Anna Thompson waited in the debriefing room at Earth Defense Headquarters. She was a tall woman with gray-streaked hair and eyes that missed nothing. 20 years commanding the defense fleet had left her with a reputation for being tough but fair. "Captain Wright," she said as James entered. Her eyes darted to the civilians, behind him. "I wasn't informed you had passengers." "My brother and his family," James replied. "The only survivors of New Eden that I know of." The room went silent. Admiral Thompson's composure cracked for just a moment before she regained control. "Survivors? You mean?" "New Eden is gone," James said, his voice flat. "Completely destroyed by an alien force with technology far beyond ours." He connected his data chip to the room's display system. Images appeared on the screen. The massive alien ships, the devastating weapons, the methodical destruction of an entire colony. "I recorded everything I could," James explained. "Sensor readings, energy, signatures, weapons capabilities. They called themselves the Vex. At least that's the closest I can translate. They left a message before they started firing." He played the recorded message. "Your expansion ends here. Return to your homeworld or face extinction." Admiral Thompson studied the data with a grim expression. "You did well to bring this back, Captain. Your quick thinking may have given us a chance." She turned to an aide. "Call an emergency session of the United Earth Government. All representatives, including those from the colonies. Priority 1. 3 days later, representatives from every human settlement gathered in the Grand Assembly Hall in Geneva. Colony. Leaders participated via holographic projection, their faces showing varying degrees of shock and fear as they learned about New Eden's fate. James sat with his brother's family in a private section, all of them still wearing borrowed clothes. Robert stared blankly ahead, while Lisa tried to keep Michael occupied with a tablet game. The boy was too young to fully understand what had happened, but he knew enough to be quieter than any 10-year-old should be. Admiral Thompson stood at the central podium, her uniform crisp and perfect, her posture unyielding. The hall fell silent as she began to speak. 3 days ago, we received confirmation that New Eden Colony was destroyed by an alien force calling themselves the Vex. Over 3 million of our people were killed in an unprovoked attack. The evidence suggests this was not a misunderstanding or a limited conflict, but a deliberate act of genocide. Murmurs ran through the assembly. On the screen showing the colonial representatives, faces paled. The Vex left a message demanding that we cease all expansion and retreat to Earth or face extinction. Thompson paused, letting the words sink in. I am here today to tell you what our answer will be. She gestured, and the large screen behind her displayed images of New Eden before the attack, the thriving colony, the schools, the farms, the people. They believed destroying one colony would break our will to explore the stars. They believed we would cower and retreat. They do not understand humanity. Her voice grew stronger. For every life taken on New Eden, 1,000 ships will answer. The assembly erupted in a mix of cheers and shocked exclamations. Thompson raised her hand for silence. I propose an immediate shift to wartime production across all human settlements. Every shipyard, factory, and fabrication plant will be converted to military manufacturing. Scientists and engineers will focus on developing countermeasures to Vex technology based on Captain Wright's data. The Mars representative, a thin man with the pale skin of someone who lived under domes, spoke up. 1,000 ships for every life? That's over 3 billion vessels. We don't have the resources or time. It's not literal, interrupted the representative from Europa, a dark-skinned woman whose family had led the Ice Moon's settlement for generations. It's a statement of intent, but I agree with the Admiral. We must respond with overwhelming force. Thompson nodded. I propose a fleet of 900,000 ships. It's an ambitious number, but achievable if we commit all our resources and work together. This won't be just a military response, but a message to any other species watching. Attack humanity at your peril. The debate lasted for hours. Some argued for attempting communication first. Others feared committing so completely to war might leave human settlements vulnerable to other threats. But as the day wore on, the images of New Eden's destruction kept returning to the screens, and with them, resolve hardened. James was called to speak about what he had witnessed. He stood tall despite his exhaustion and grief. "I watched my nephew's school vaporized," he said simply. "I saw farms burning and hospitals collapsing. The Vex didn't try to communicate before attacking. They didn't target only military installations. They methodically erased an entire human settlement from existence." He paused. "We can try to talk to them, but we should do it from a position of strength, not fear." By day's end, the vote was nearly unanimous. Operation Righteous Response would begin immediately. Humanity was going to war. James found himself promoted to commander and given leadership of a special operations unit. Their mission: gather intelligence on the enemy while the fleet was being built. "We need to know more about what we're facing," Admiral Thompson told him in her office a week after the assembly. "Your scout ship has been upgraded with the best stealth technology we have. Your job is to infiltrate the edge of what we believe is Vex territory and bring back information." James looked at the star chart on her desk, noting the systems marked with red warning symbols. "These are all beyond the range of our normal patrols." "Yes, and that may be why the Vex targeted New Eden first. It was our farthest colony, pushing into space they apparently consider theirs." Thompson's eyes were hard. "Your brother and his family will be given new identities and a home on Earth, with full government support. I understand if you want to stay with them." "No," James interrupted. "I need to do this, for them, and for everyone on New Eden." 1 month later, James and his crew of 12 departed Earth in their modified scout ship, now renamed Memory of Eden. Their mission would take them dangerously close to where the Vex had been encountered, with no guarantee of return. As the ship entered the jump point and disappeared from Earth's sensors, production was already underway across the solar system. Shipyards on Earth, Mars, and the moons of Jupiter and Saturn worked around the clock. Ships designed for exploration and colonization were being retrofitted with weapons and armor. In laboratories, scientists studied the data James had brought back, looking for weaknesses in Vex technology. The first breakthrough came when they discovered a unique frequency that disrupted the alien shielding systems. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Humanity had been attacked, but humanity would not fall. The Vex had destroyed one colony, believing it would force a retreat. They would soon learn how wrong they were. 6 months into the mission, Commander James Wright's scout ship Memory of Eden drifted silently at the edge of a star system, 30 light-years from where New Eden had stood. The ship's enhanced stealth systems made it nearly invisible to sensors, allowing James and his crew to observe Vex activities without detection. "Another supply convoy," reported Tina, the sensor specialist. Her eyes never left the screen as she recorded the movement of 5 Vex vessels. "Same route as the others. They're definitely supplying something in the Arcturus system." James moved to stand behind her, studying the data. After months of careful observation, they had mapped significant portions of Vex territory. The picture emerging was surprising. "Still no sign of any major fleet movements," he noted. "Their patrol patterns suggest they're defending only 16 star systems, not the vast empire we feared." Lieutenant Marcus, the tactical officer, nodded in agreement. "Their technology is impressive, but their numbers don't match what we expected. I count fewer than 5,000 ships total across all monitored systems." "They attacked New Eden because they feared our expansion," James said, the realization crystallizing in his mind. "Not because they were already planning a full invasion." He moved to the communication station. "Prepare a data packet for Earth. Include all our observations and my assessment. The Vex are technologically superior but limited in scope and numbers. They struck New Eden as a warning, expecting us to retreat in fear." As the encrypted message was prepared for transmission, James stared at the star map they had compiled. The Vex homeworld had been identified, a planet orbiting a yellow star very similar to Sol. Images showed sprawling cities and massive orbital structures. evidence of a highly advanced civilization. "What do you think Earth will do with this information, Commander?" asked Marcus. "It won't change our response," James replied, his voice firm. "But it might change our strategy. The Vex need to learn that humanity doesn't scare easily." 1 year after the fall of New Eden, Admiral Anna Thompson stood on the bridge of the newly commissioned Dreadnought Remembrance. Through the massive viewports, she watched as ships gathered in Earth orbit. Thousands upon thousands of vessels ranging from tiny fighters to enormous carriers. Thompson's aide, Lieutenant Perez, approached with a tablet. "Final count confirmed. Admiral, 900,000 vessels assembled and ready. It's magnificent." Thompson nodded, allowing herself a moment of pride. The industrial achievement was unprecedented in human history. Shipyards across the solar system had worked without pause for a year, an effort that united humanity like nothing before. "Status report from the fleet commanders?" she asked. "All sections report ready," Perez replied. "Admiral Davis commands the vanguard of 300,000 ships. Admiral Khatri leads the main battle group of 400,000. You command the strategic reserve of 200,000. Thompson studied the tactical display showing the vast armada. Each dot represented a ship. The screen was so crowded with them that they formed a solid mass in Earth orbit. Never in history had humans assembled such a force. And Commander Wright's special forces? His teams are distributed throughout the fleet, prepared for ground operations once we reach Vex territory. The intelligence he gathered has been crucial to our planning." Thompson nodded. Wright's mission had revealed vital information. Most importantly, that the Vex were not the unstoppable empire they had initially feared. Their technology was superior, but their territory was limited to a handful of star systems. They had attacked New Eden not from a position of overwhelming strength, but from fear of human expansion. A message alert sounded, and the main screen shifted to show the face of President Garcia of the United Earth Government. "Admiral Thompson," the president said, her expression solemn, "the final authorization has been given. Operation Righteous Response may commence at your discretion." Thompson straightened, feeling the weight of history on her shoulders. "Understood, Madam President. We will not fail." After the call ended, Thompson turned to her communications officer. "Open a channel to all ships." The officer worked his console. "Channel open, Admiral. You're addressing the entire fleet." Thompson took a deep breath before speaking, her words traveling to 900,000 vessels and the millions of men and women who crewed them. "This is Admiral Thompson. 1 year ago, an alien force destroyed the colony of New Eden, killing over 3 million innocent people. Today, we answer that atrocity. Our mission is clear, to ensure that no human colony will ever again face such a threat." She paused, looking out at the assembled fleet. "We carry with us the memory of New Eden, but we also carry the future of humanity. We fight not only for vengeance, but for our right to exist among the stars without fear. The Vex believed that destroying one colony would break our will. Today they learn how wrong they were." Throughout the fleet, crews listened in silence. On fighters designed for speed and maneuverability, pilots ran final checks on their systems. On massive carriers housing hundreds of smaller craft, flight crews prepared for launch. On specialized electronic warfare platforms, technicians monitored the new weapons designed specifically to counter Vex shielding technology. Thompson concluded her address. "Each ship in this fleet represents the work of countless hands. Each crew member represents the unbreakable spirit of humanity. Together we make this promise to the memory of New Eden. You are not forgotten, and you will be avenged." She nodded to her navigation officer. "Initiate jump sequence. All ships, to follow in formation." In the lead scout ship, Commander James Wright received the order to jump. His vessel would be among the first to arrive in Vex territory, tasked with confirming the enemy positions before the main fleet arrived. As his ship prepared to enter the jump point, James thought of his brother's family. Robert, Lisa, and Michael had been given a new home on Earth, but their lives would forever bear the scar of New Eden's destruction. Michael, now 11, still had nightmares about the day the sky turned red. "Jump calculations complete, Commander," reported his navigator. "Ready on your order. James nodded. Take us in. The scout ship disappeared into the jump point, followed by thousands of others. Across the solar system, humans watched news reports of the fleet's departure with a mixture of pride, hope, and apprehension. For the first time in its history, humanity was taking war to the stars. In shipyards throughout human space, production continued. Though 900,000 ships had departed, more were being built. A clear message that humanity's response would not end with this first wave. The industrial machine that had been set in motion would not easily stop. On the rebuilt bridge of the Civilian, transport that had carried him and his family to safety, Robert Wright watched the fleet depart. The ship had been repaired and upgraded, now serving as a medical support vessel in the fleet's rear echelon. For New Eden, Robert whispered, thinking of the home and life they had lost. Throughout the Armada, the same sentiment echoed. For New Eden, for humanity, for the future. The great assembly of ships, the largest fleet ever created by human hands, vanished into jump points across the solar system, bound for Vex territory and the reckoning that awaited. The first wave of 300,000 human ships emerged from jump points at the edge of the Vex star system, designated Target Alpha. Commander James Wright's scout ship was among the first to arrive, its advanced sensors immediately scanning for enemy positions. Multiple Vex vessels detected, reported Tina, her fingers flying across the sensor station. Approximately 2,000 ships in defensive positions around the third planet. James studied the tactical display. The Vex had arranged their ships in a spherical formation around their colony world, a standard defensive posture. What wasn't standard was their reaction, or lack thereof. They're not moving to intercept, James noted with surprise. Either they don't see us yet, or they're in shock, finished Lieutenant Marcus. Our intelligence suggested they never expected a human response of this magnitude. James opened a channel to Admiral Davis's flagship. Commander Wright reporting. Vex fleet confirmed at Target Alpha, approximately 2,000 vessels. They appeared to be in a defensive posture only. No indication of advance toward our position. Admiral. Davis's voice came through clearly. Understood, Commander. Continue monitoring. Main battle group will emerge in 5 minutes. Be advised that we are detecting unusual communications traffic between Vex vessels. They appear to be panicking. James couldn't help the grim smile that crossed his face. They expected us to cower after New Eden. They never imagined this. As predicted, 5 minutes later, the main battle group of 400,000 ships emerged from their jump points. The human fleet now stretched across an enormous section of space, dwarfing the Vex defensive force. On the Vex command ship, Supreme Commander Krell stared at the sensor readings in disbelief. The translator implant in his brain struggled to find the right words in his language for what he was seeing. Impossible, he finally managed. Their fleet, it cannot be this large. His second-in-command, Officer Tarn, was equally stunned. The humans were supposed to retreat after we destroyed their colony. Our analysts predicted they would abandon their expansion plans and return to their home system. Obviously, Krell hissed, the analysts were wrong. A communication officer approached, his posture showing extreme distress, a universal body language that James Wright would have recognized despite the alien physiology. Supreme Commander, we are receiving a transmission from the human fleet. It is being broadcast on all frequencies. Krell straightened his 7-foot frame. Display it. The main screen showed Admiral Thompson's face, her expression cold and determined. This is Admiral Anna Thompson of the United Earth Defense Fleet. 1 year ago, your forces destroyed our colony of New Eden, killing over 3 million civilians without provocation or warning. We are here to ensure that never happens again. Krell listened as the translation software converted her words. You have 2 options, Thompson continued. Immediate and unconditional surrender, with reparations to be determined for the people of New Eden, or total war against the combined might of humanity. You have 1 hour to respond. The transmission ended, leaving the Vex command center in silence. 1 hour, Tarn finally said. They give us 1 hour to decide the fate of our entire species. Krell moved to the tactical display, studying the overwhelming human force. The Vex had always relied on their superior technology rather than numbers. That advantage meant nothing against a fleet of this size. "Send to all vessels," he ordered. "Prepare for battle." On the bridge of the Remembrance, Admiral Thompson received the Vex response. "They're rejecting our terms," her communications officer reported. "All Vex vessels are powering weapons." Thompson had expected this. The Vex had shown their character at New Eden. They wouldn't surrender easily. "All ships, this is Admiral Thompson. The enemy has chosen to fight. Execute Battle Plan Omega." Throughout the human fleet, crews moved to battle stations. Fighters launched from carrier ships. Electronic warfare vessels activated their jamming systems, targeting the specific frequencies that Commander Wright's intelligence had identified as critical to Vex shield technology. The battle began with a massive, coordinated assault. Thousands of human fighters swarmed toward the Vex defensive line, drawing fire while larger vessels moved into position. Though the Vex weapons were more powerful, they couldn't target the overwhelming number of small craft attacking from all directions. James Wright led a special operations team aboard a stealth insertion craft. Their mission was to board one of the smaller Vex vessels and capture it intact, securing valuable technology and possibly prisoners for interrogation. "Approaching target," the pilot announced. "Their shields are fluctuating, the jammers are working." James checked his tactical gear one last time. "Remember, we need the ship's systems intact. Use shock weapons only, and avoid damaging the control center." His team of 12 nodded in understanding. They were the best of Earth's special forces, trained specifically for this mission over the past year. The insertion craft attached to the Vex ship's hull using magnetic clamps. Cutting tools quickly created an entry point, and James led his team inside. The interior was strange. Corridors designed for beings larger than humans with an odd green-blue light that made shadows appear deeper than they should. They encountered the first Vex crew members near what appeared to be an engineering section. The aliens were tall, with grayish skin and 4 arms. They carried energy weapons but seemed unprepared for close-quarters combat. James fired his shock rifle, sending one Vex crumpling to the deck. His team quickly subdued the others. As they moved deeper into the ship, resistance became more organized but still manageable. The Vex, it seemed, were not warriors by nature. Their power came from their technology, not combat skill. The team reached the bridge and secured it within minutes. James ordered the captured crew to be restrained but treated with care. One of his team, a xenolinguist named Dr. Hall, began attempting to communicate with the ship's commander. "They're scared," Dr. Hall reported after a brief exchange. "They never expected us to respond like this. Their leader keeps asking why we brought so many ships." James activated his communication link. "Admiral Thompson, this is Commander Wright. We've secured a Vex vessel with minimal damage. Beginning data extraction now." While James's team worked to download the Vex ship's database, the main battle raged throughout the system. The human fleet's sheer numbers overwhelmed the Vex defenses, despite their technological advantage. Where Vex ships managed to destroy human vessels with their powerful weapons, 10 more human ships moved to fill the gap. Admiral Davis coordinated the attack on the main Vex orbital stations, while Admiral Khatri's forces targeted the defensive platforms protecting the planet below. The human strategy wasn't subtle. It didn't need to be. Overwhelming force applied with a clear objective: total control of the system. On his captured Vex vessel, James received a priority transmission from Admiral Thompson. "Commander, we're detecting unusual energy readings from the Vex homeworld. They may be preparing some kind of last resort weapon. Your new objective is to find information about this weapon in the ship's database." James redirected his team immediately. With the help of the translation software developed from his earlier intelligence gathering, they searched through the alien computer systems. "Found something," reported his tech specialist. "It's not a weapon. It's a communication array. They're sending a distress signal to other Vex systems." James felt a chill. If the Vex could summon reinforcements, the battle might become more complicated. "Admiral," he reported, "the Vex are calling for help. We need to take out their long-range Communication systems immediately. Thompson's response was immediate. Understood. Redirecting strike forces now. Within minutes, precision strikes from human bombers destroyed the massive communication arrays on the Vex world's surface. The distress signal cut off mid-transmission. By the 6-hour mark, the battle was effectively over. The Vex fleet was decimated, their orbital defenses destroyed. Human ships surrounded the planet, weapons trained on key population centers. Admiral. Thompson opened a channel to the Vex planetary government. Your fleet is destroyed. Your defenses are gone. Surrender now and your people will be spared. Refuse, and we will have no choice but to continue our attack. This time, the Vex response was immediate. A different alien face appeared on the screen, this one marked with symbols that suggested a political rather than military leader. We surrender, the Vex leader said through the translation system. Please, no more destruction. We will meet any terms. The first system had fallen. To the human fleet, Operation Righteous Fury had begun. The human fleet moved through Vex territory like an unstoppable tide. System after system fell, each victory faster than the last as the Vex's limited military resources were stretched beyond breaking. 3 months after the first battle, Admiral Thompson stood on the bridge of the Remembrance, reviewing the latest reports. 5 systems secured, Admiral, Lieutenant Perez reported. Only the Vex homeworld remains. Their remaining fleet has consolidated there, approximately 1,000 ships. Thompson nodded. Status of our forces? We've lost 22,000 vessels across all operations, Perez replied. Most were smaller craft. The majority of our capital ships remain intact. 22,000 ships, a devastating number in any other context. But against the backdrop of 900,000, it represented a remarkably small loss. The Vex technology was superior, but they simply couldn't match humanity's industrial might and determination. And Commander Wright's team? They've completed analysis of the captured Vex databases. His report was sent to your personal terminal an hour ago. He's requesting to speak with you directly, Admiral. Says it's urgent. Thompson raised an eyebrow. James Wright wasn't one for exaggeration. Put him through to my ready room. In the privacy of her office adjoining the bridge, Thompson activated the secure communication system. James's face appeared on the screen, looking troubled despite their overwhelming success. Commander, what have you found? Something that changes. Everything, Admiral, James replied. My team has been translating Vex historical records from the captured ships. The attack on New Eden, it wasn't authorized by their central government. Thompson leaned forward. Explain. The Vex have had a military faction called the Protectors. Extremists who believed any expansion by other species represented an existential threat. They operated with significant autonomy. James paused. According to these records, this faction launched the attack on New Eden against the orders of the Vex ruling council. Are you saying their government didn't approve the attack? Thompson asked, her voice carefully controlled. Not only did they not approve it, they tried to stop it. James sent several translated documents to her screen. The ruling council sent ships to intercept the attack force, but they were too late. After New Eden was destroyed, there was internal conflict. The military faction seized control, claiming that an overwhelming human response was coming and only they could save the Vex. Thompson was silent for a long moment, processing this information. And this military faction is the one we've been fighting. Yes. But according to these most recent records, they've been overthrown. The original government has regained control of the homeworld after our last victory. James's expression was grim. We've been at war with the wrong Vex, Admiral. The Remembrance led the final approach to the Vex homeworld, a blue-green planet orbiting a yellow star. The remaining human fleet, still over 870,000 ships strong, formed a sphere around the system ready for the final battle. But the expected resistance didn't materialize. Instead, a transmission came from the planet's surface requesting direct communication with the human leadership. In the Remembrance's conference room, a holographic projector displayed the image of the Vex High Chancellor, the leader of their civilian government. Standing beside Admiral Thompson were Commander James Wright and President Garcia, who had traveled from Earth to witness the end of the conflict. "Hi, Admiral," the Vex leader began, using Thompson's incorrectly translated title. "We formally request an end to hostilities and offer our unconditional surrender." President Garcia stepped forward. "We accept your surrender, but before we discuss terms, we need answers. Over 3 million of our people died at New Eden. Someone must be held accountable." The High Chancellor's forearms moved in a complex gesture that the translation software interpreted as deep regret. "The destruction of your colony was not authorized by our government. The military faction responsible has been removed from power. Those who ordered the attack have been imprisoned and await justice." "Justice?" James couldn't help interrupting. "What justice can there be for 3 million dead?" The Vex leader turned toward him. "No justice can restore lives lost. But we offer not only accountability but reparation." The alien pressed something on a control panel. "We wish to share with humanity all our technological advancements, medical, scientific, engineering, and we offer our knowledge of other species in this sector of the galaxy, some of whom pose greater threats than we ever did." Admiral Thompson studied the Vex carefully. "Why would you share such valuable resources?" "Because we recognize now what we failed to see before," the High Chancellor replied. "Humanity is not merely another expanding species. You are a force, unlike any we have encountered. When faced with the destruction of one colony, you responded with a fleet that could conquer worlds. Your industrial capacity, your unity of purpose, these are strengths we cannot match." The alien's translator conveyed a tone of genuine respect. "We believed ourselves superior because of our technology. You have shown us that technology alone does not determine a species' power. Better to have humanity as allies than enemies." President Garcia and Admiral Thompson exchanged glances. This was more than they had expected. Not just victory, but the potential for a significant advancement of human civilization. "We will need guarantees," Thompson said. "Verification of your claims about the military faction, oversight of the transfer of technology, and most importantly, a formal acknowledgement of responsibility for New Eden." "All of this and more," the High Chancellor agreed. "We also propose a joint memorial to honor those lost, a place of remembrance and commitment that such actions will never be repeated." 1 year later, James Wright stood on the rebuilt central plaza of New Eden. The colony had been reconstructed with Vex assistance, its buildings more advanced and secure than before. New inhabitants had begun to settle there, drawn by the opportunity to be part of humanity's most distant outpost. In the center of the plaza stood a monument of black stone and glowing blue crystal, a combination of human and Vex artistic styles. Etched into the stone were the names of every person who had died in the original attack. Below the names was an inscription in both human and Vex languages. "We explore in peace but answer violence with overwhelming force. Remember New Eden." Robert, Lisa, and Michael stood beside James looking up at the monument. Michael, now 12, placed a small toy spaceship at its base, the same model he had shown James on that fateful day 2 years ago. "Do you think there will be more fighting?" Michael asked. James put his hand on his nephew's shoulder. "Not with the Vex. And if other threats emerge, they'll face both our species, not just one." The alliance between humans and Vex had already yielded remarkable advances. Vex medical technology had extended human lifespans. Human manufacturing methods had revolutionized Vex production. Together, they were stronger than either would have been alone. Admiral Thompson approached, now wearing the formal uniform of the newly formed Interstellar Defense Command. "Commander Wright, or should I say Director Wright, your new office at the Joint Species Intelligence Agency is ready." James nodded. "Thank you, Admiral. I'll report there next week." He had accepted a role coordinating information about potential threats to both human and Vex interests, a position that would help ensure nothing like the New Eden disaster ever happened again. As the sun set over the new colony, ships could be seen in orbit, some human, some Vex, all working together to build defensive systems that would protect this restored world. The Vex had destroyed one human colony. 900,000 human ships had been humanity's reply. And from that show of strength had come not just victory but something more valuable, understanding and alliance. The stars remained open to exploration, and humanity's place among them was secure.